While you'd think a channel dedicated towards games from the 80s and 90s might consider the 2010s a barren wasteland, that's not the case. There are still plenty of decent games being released over the decades since gaming's high watermark, and here are 10 I really enjoyed from the last 10 years. The Stanley Parable. Play it, or don't play it. The choice is entirely yours. Or is it? Stanley decided to skip to the next entry. He had no desire to talk to his audience about this source-based walking simulator, with superb narration, multiple endings, and branching plot lines. Spec Ops The Line. This is your standard, over-the-shoulder, military cover-based action shooter. You had your typical modern warfare zone, this time a ravaged Dubai to run and gun through. You had your various zones and squad tactics and standard soldier types with their manly camaraderie. There is absolutely nothing remarkable about the dull gameplay or passable graphics whatsoever. That's what makes it the perfect deconstruction of the very genre it emulates. The story. The story gives you two options. Keep going or turn off the game. Those are your choices. It doesn't last more than a few hours, but in those hours it drags you kicking and screaming through an incredible plot that I honestly can't talk about. It's not just about the typical horrors of war either. There's something much more insidious and psychological hiding in there, and you'll have to play it to find out. The Walking Dead. You play this fella called Lee who finds this innocent and vulnerable child alone during a zombie apocalypse. You cynically think to yourself that this will be an emotional ploy to tug at your heartstrings and oh god, what was that? Oh god, no! You become so wrapped up in survival and dealing with the various people around you in your little group as the plot of this point-and-click adventure careens forward that you only realise every so often that the aforementioned vulnerable little girl is still about. Masterful storytelling and superb tension featuring timed dialogue and action choices that don't feel like quick-time events. All building up to a climax that will leave you teary-eyed. It's a shame the company never topped this title. Saints Row the Third. Its predecessor had gained some degree of fame for volition on consoles as a poor man's Grand Theft Auto, and there seemed to be a collective realization that they were never going to eclipse the efforts of Rockstar in creating a gritty and compelling open-world crime drama. So the solution was simple. Add a load of off-the-wall, crude slapstick humour to the proceedings. Grand Theft Auto began as a parody of the violence found in America. Now Volition decide to parody the parody and turn the hilarity up to 11. The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. Take Oblivion, give it a coating of snow, integrate some of the better gameplay mods and streamline all those nasty RPG bits. Improve the engine somewhat, give the surrounding culture a distinctly Scandinavian twang. Bob's your uncle. It's not so much that Skyrim has done anything differently from previous titles, it's just that Bethesda knew if they provided a solid open world base for the modding community, that they'd fix the rest. Portal 2. It's just like the original Portal, but bigger and better, with more puzzles, more plot, and more dialogue. Oh, and an absolutely marvellous cooperative multiplayer to boot. Not much more needs to be said about this particular puzzle title. If you don't know what Portal is, then do yourself a favour and find out. Mass Effect 2. An improvement on almost all fronts, streamlining the gameplay into a more action RPG than straight up RPG, and appealing to a larger demographic while still having a deep plot and meaningful characters. This was the last real BioWare game, and while that might seem like a true Scotsman fallacy, what's left of the company now isn't the same company that created the brilliance of the games that came before, or even the suspect sequel that limped over the finish line courtesy of lots of DLC to fix it up. Life is Strange. A game about the plight of being an insecure teenage American college girl. I could not be further from the protagonist and her surroundings if I tried. The idea of sitting through eye-rolling melodrama and cringe-inducing dialogue made me hesitant to even try this modern take on the point-and-click adventure game. I got it on sale and promptly had my expectations blown away. Tremendous writing, great mechanics, lots of heart, and even a degree of replayability. I still choke up thinking about some of my decisions. Fallout New Vegas. Not exactly a surprising choice, given the videos on my channel. It's got the post-apocalyptic wasteland setting that is the hallmark of a Fallout title, but in addition to this you have a distinctly western theme, as you head off into the Mojave Desert surrounding Vegas. You were a courier carrying a delivery, you were shot in the head and buried, and the delivery was stolen from you. Get the delivery back, and get your vengeance. With a more intricate faction-based plot and better characterization than the Bethesda-developed titles it borrows heavily from in terms of mechanics, New Vegas draws more influence from the original pair of Fallout games published by Interplay. This means you can complete Fallout New Vegas the way you want to. You don't have to lift a single hand to anyone, and you can talk your way out of nearly every situation imaginable should your speech score be high enough. Or you could side with any number of factions in order to tip the balance of power. Or go it alone and brutally murder anyone and anything that breathes with a golf club. You have that much choice, and just as much consequence. There's also something about being able to access high-powered weaponry to blow away your opponents that fantasy RPGs just can't match. I keep calling this my favourite first-person RPG of all time, and there's a good reason for that. Why the first-person qualifier? Well, The Witcher 3. Praise Geraldo! This game combined a huge open world commonly seen in Bethesda titles with the intricate plotting and characterization that were the hallmarks of games from Obsidian and BioWare. You can exclusively play the story content and rack up over 100 hours. You can ignore vast chunks of the game and still find yourself with a huge amount of time spent in its world. If you fully commit to playing properly and not hopping about from place to place ticking off quests like a shopping list, then you'll find well over 200 hours await you. Every single one of those hours will be bringing something new or interesting to the table, with every event and action having some degree of meaning to the huge story unfolding its multiple branches. The quests are always entertaining, and often have an unexpected sting in the tail. The protagonist and his surrounding world have had a multitude of books and games to flesh out the backstories and lore of which they are a part. I could touch on the wondrous and evocative musical score that often has you taking a step away from your keyboard and listening for sheer pleasure rather than playing. I could wax about the constant attempts to retune and improve the combat, the superb revamp of the inventory management, the hundreds of little niggles that have been ironed out and streamlined compared to other games in the genre. It's not perfect, but it does everything well enough or better than the titles that came before it that it's hard to fault it on anything other than minor niggles. 5 years later and it's still the best of its generation, and the best of its genre. Oh, and my favourite game of all time.